Hello, everyone, and good morning. Thank you all very much for coming. It's wonderful to have so many people turn up again for this, the third session in our Living Well with Prostate Cancer webinar series, and for today's session on coping with advanced disease. My name is David James. I'm the head of patient projects at Prostate Cancer Research. For those of you who might not know who Prostate Cancer Research are, we are a medical research charity that's focused on the prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of advanced prostate cancer and better quality of life outcomes for patients. We're proud to fund 15 high-quality, innovative projects right across the UK with a shared aim of developing breakthrough treatments so that one day we can live in a world where people are free from the impact of prostate cancer. So some of our most cutting-edge projects include one where our scientists are using IT and machine learning for artificial intelligence to see if we can divide and conquer prostate cancer. By looking at an enormous amount of data, they hope to work out which cancers need to be treated, which can be safely ignored, and then which treatments should be used for each individual person. But we also have projects focused on existing treatments as well, such as radiotherapy and hormone therapy. And our scientists are working to see how we can reduce their side effects and ultimately ensure better outcomes for people affected by prostate cancer. I'd like to take a brief moment to tell you about one of the newest projects that we've just recently announced funding for. So previous research has found that people with advanced prostate cancer have high levels of a protein called MCL1. Little is known about the role of MCL1 in prostate cancer, but the protein has already been shown to be important for the development of other cancers, including breast cancer. And patients with high levels of the protein are also more likely to develop resistance to hormone therapy. So Dr. Kirstine Campbell and her team hope to explore the role of MCL1 and understand why we see such high levels of the protein in advanced prostate cancer. Now, drugs targeting MCL1 have actually already been developed and are currently being tested in clinical trials to see if they can be used to treat blood cancers. The researchers believe that these same drugs could be repurposed and combined with other treatments like chemotherapy or hormone therapy to treat prostate cancer more effectively. So this project, which begins in October, will run for 3 years, and we hope by the end of this project to know whether these drugs can be used to treat prostate cancer. And then the next step would be to take these into clinical trials. So obviously beyond our research, we're dedicated to educating, empowering, and supporting our patient, partner, family, and carer communities. That is why we launched this webinar series, Living Well with Prostate Cancer, in collaboration with our good friends Tackle Prostate Cancer, the UK's National Federation of Prostate Cancer Patient Support Groups. This series, which is running from this month right up until January, encompasses a whole variety of topics that you told us you want more support on. So for those of you who joined us or in either one of the past two sessions, you'll know that what we're doing is we're bringing experts in different subject matters to give a presentation before opening up the session to answer any questions you may have. We hope you'll find this session useful and informative as those who attended the previous sessions have told us they did. And we hope you'll be able to join us for many of the future ones as well. I would also like to take a moment to thank the charity Penny Brawn UK, who are leading the sessions in August as part of our Whole Life Approach month. So just a few quick little housekeeping points. I know many of you joined us in previous sessions, but for those of you who are new, this is a Zoom webinar session rather than a Zoom meeting. And the Zoom meeting is the ones that many of us are really more familiar with. So all attendees automatically will have their videos and microphones muted. And that's because we're actually going to be recording this session and then sending that recording out to all attendees, as well as making it available to anyone who wasn't able to join us on this, at least where I am, grey and cloudy Wednesday morning. So the first 45 minutes of this session will be a presentation by our speaker today. And then once that's done, we will open up to questions. And we've set aside approximately 30 minutes to answer as many of your questions as we can. There is no chat function enabled on this session, but there is a Q&A option. So if you have any questions during the session, either for the speaker or for myself, any sort of housekeeping points, or you're not sure about something, feel free to type it in there and then we'll be able to address any of these questions either at the time or when we open up the session to questions later on. So now with all that out of the way, it's my great pleasure to hand over to our presenter today, Allon Stokes, who's the counselling lead at Pennybrawn UK. Allon, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, David. Hopefully you can all see me, and welcome all of you today. So before I start, I'm just going to briefly talk about Pennybrawn UK for those of you who haven't been here before. So hopefully you can all see that slide. Is that right? Can David just give me a yes or a no on that?
Not yet, no.
Great, that's gone well. Always a good start. A counsellor and a slideshow, yeah, never a good combination. No problem, let me just, it would help if I shared my screen. There we go. Hopefully that's looking a bit better now. Is that viewable?
Yeah.
Brilliant. So very briefly, introduction to Pennybrawn UK. The NHS will do a fantastic job of really focusing on the physical disease, the illness. But as you will all be aware, cancer affects so much more than just that part of your body with some bad cells in. And so what Pennybrawn UK really tries to do is support the rest of the body, the mind, the soul, whatever, all those other areas that the NHS just doesn't have the funds or the timing to do. And it was actually set up, as you can see there, over 40 years ago by these two wonderful women. The lady on the right is Pennybrawn herself. She was diagnosed with breast cancer in the 1980s and was desperate for some holistic support, and in the end had to go to Germany to find anything suitable. When she returned with her good friend Pat Pilkington on the left, they set up what was initially the Bristol Cancer Care Centre and developed over time into Pennybrawn UK. And as it says there, we need more than medicine to live well with cancer. We need to care for our mind, emotions, spirit, heart and soul. And that's very much what we're trying to do 40 years on, is to support all those other areas of people's lives that are affected with a diagnosis of cancer. So before I actually go into the main presentation, I think David's going to just launch a quick poll just at the beginning with a few questions for you to answer. And I think you've got about a minute and a half just to respond to those 3 questions. If you scroll down, there is a third one, and then I'll start the presentation properly.
And we're closing the poll in 5 seconds. Great.
Lovely, thank you. So moving on to the, hopefully, there we go.
So Allon, just so quickly, yeah. Can you see those results I've shared with you?
I can, but I can see the slides, so I'm afraid I
okay.
managed to miss them and download them, so click it off. So, but
no problem. So why don't I just quickly give you a quick update. Basically, on the first question, on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being the lowest and 5 the highest, how able do you feel to support your mental as opposed to your physical well-being? We have about a third saying number 3, roughly equal number at number 4, and then about a fifth saying 2 and 5. So it's a real range of answers there. The second question, in the last week, have you used any tools or techniques to help manage your anxiety, any anxiety you might be feeling? Pretty much a rough split. We have about 1 in 10 or 8% saying not sure, and then pretty much split evenly roughly about 47% yes and no.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
And then the final question, in the last week, have you tried to support yourself emotionally? E.g. doing something that's made you feel happier, put a smile on your face and made you feel positive? We have about 80%, 8 in 10 saying yes, and the rest split between no and not sure.
Great, thank you very much. Well, sounds like I've got no work to do here today, so I'll be off now. I mean, that's really nice to hear that actually a lot of those things people are managing to do things already to help themselves. I actually really think this is a great little image. So we have something at Penny Bond called the Bristol Whole Life approach, and it's basically this sort of circle in the middle, and it's showing all those aspects in our lives that will make up who we are, both before, during, and hopefully after cancer. And what I like about this in a way is that the actual bit, which is the cancer, I'm not sure if my little mouse is showing up, but it's just that little green splodge in the body. And then looking at all those other areas around the outside, obviously these are looking at things that can have a negative impact. But equally, if we work on these things, then they're going to maybe have a more positive impact. And recognizing that there's so much more to each of you than that part of your body with some cancer cells in it. And it's not to diminish that, of course, but actually all these other areas we can work on and then have a positive impact on how we're feeling. So hopefully if I can scroll down. Yep. So first of all, around the emotional impact. As it says there, a cancer diagnosis which is far beyond the person diagnosed, it will affect both you and all the people around you, both family, friends, but also, colleagues, people you know on a quite casual basis. People will have had their own experiences of cancer that might trigger them, or they will be affected knowing somebody they love and care for has something life-threatening or life-challenging. Also, as you know, many of you will have probably had very little dealings with the medical profession, hospitals in your life, and suddenly there you are spending a lot of time in those strange new buildings, situations, learning a whole language and vocabulary you never heard before, and that can be really challenging. And people often talk about living with cancer as a full-time job, and many of you will have full-time jobs or part-time jobs, or if not, certainly a lot of other things in your life, and then adding a very time-consuming, challenging, at times painful or frightening element to that just makes life even busier. And some of the things that people might experience, and it's not a nice list, but the reason I have it there is I think really important, and a lot of what I do in my work as a counsellor is often normalising what people experience. People can often feel there's something wrong with them for the emotions they're feeling. Now, I should be grateful that they found it, or I'm feeling really angry and everybody says I should be positive. And actually it's normal to feel a whole range of emotions. And I think being honest with ourselves as well as with others is really key to taking care of ourselves emotionally. And I think, whatever your situation is with your cancer, and I appreciate this is often for you this is living with advanced prostate cancer, but coming to terms almost emotionally with that diagnosis can be as challenging as anything you deal with physically in the treatment. And often what we see at Penny Bron is that people, when they are initially diagnosed and going through that first treatment, actually there can be maybe not a lot of space almost for the emotional side. And then as people start to recover physically, that's when the emotional impact can really hit people. So again, there's no right or wrong way to do these things. If you're suddenly thinking, well, I've had all my treatment and I'm at the other end and I should be feeling great, but then you're struggling, again, that's really quite normal. So these are some of the common thoughts, fears, behaviours. It's okay for people to worry and to be upset and be emotional. And I think, again, there can be, particularly I think with social media and sometimes celebrities and people who are diagnosed with cancer, they can project this incredibly positive image, and I need to be really upbeat and positive all the time, and I'm going to beat this and all that. And that's great. If you can be positive most of the time, that's fantastic. But also, I think it's really important to be able to allow yourself those times when you are feeling upset or angry or emotional. You don't need to be positive all the time. That becomes another pressure. So yeah, being honest with yourselves and being honest with others, and allowing yourselves those times when it's okay to be a bit wobbly. Feeling overwhelmed, a sense of disbelief. Why me? And absolutely, cancer is not picky, it's not fair. Often people who, when they're diagnosed with a cancer, may have only had very small symptoms, possibly maybe no pain or just a bit of discomfort, or maybe it was picked up completely randomly. So it can be really difficult to get our heads around the idea that without any warning, our body has suddenly developed this thing. And again, what I said earlier about the idea about cancer being a sort of full-time job, it can feel for a while, and sometimes for a very long while, that actually you are a cancer patient before you're maybe a husband, a father, a brother, a sister, or whatever it might be. Actually, it's completely overwhelming. And it's okay, again, to experience that, to feel that. But then if you recognize that, to try and do something with it. And that idea of loss of control, I think, again, is a really significant one. When somebody is hopefully sat down in a room and told gently and sensitively that they have cancer, which unfortunately isn't always the case, almost I think the first thing that's lost is control. Because assuming that you go with the medical route and what they're suggesting, effectively your plans for the next maybe 3 or 6 months are ripped up in front of you, and you'll instead given a list of appointments and procedures, and so that's that feeling of out of control. And so one of the things I'll be talking about as we go through is things that you can do to take control back become really important. And there's lots of things we can control, even if we can't actually control what happens with the cancer itself. And finally, a lot of frustration and anger about things that maybe you can't do the same way or anymore. You may be able to do differently, maybe, or perhaps more again in the future. But it can have a huge impact then on both how we feel about ourselves, but also with relationships. And very often, people don't talk about, particularly with relationships, the intimate side of things. And that can be significant for a lot of people with any type of cancer, because it can have a real impact on those things. So again, if that is an issue for you, think about, maybe talking with maybe a cancer nurse specialist or somebody in the team, or with your loved ones, because you won't be the first or last person to experience those things. So here are some suggestions around things, particularly around emotional support, that you might be able to do to help yourselves. The first one is active thoughts. Now, very often we get thoughts and facts mixed up in our heads. So the fact is, somebody has been diagnosed with cancer. What they may then think is, oh, that's it for me, I'm definitely going to die, it's going to be horrible, it's going to be awful. Now, I can't say to any of you, sadly, that won't be the case. However, none of us know that. Those are thoughts, but very easily we can make them into facts without realizing. And how we think about the facts will have a huge impact on how we feel. So if we're able, the example I use is, if we're walking down the street and we wave to a friend across the road and they ignore us. Now, those are the facts. Now, if we thought, oh dear, I must have really upset them, they don't want to talk to me anymore, I've offended them, we're going to feel bad. Or we could think, maybe they didn't see me, maybe they didn't hear me, maybe they're having a bad day. And then we will feel quite different. Now, both of those are thoughts. The only facts are that we waved at this friend and they didn't see us. But how we think about it will then have a huge impact on our feelings. So think about some of the situations that you're facing and try and separate out the facts from any thoughts you might have, and then think, is there a different way to think about that? And I always think it's about trying to come up with a realistic view. It's not around going from an incredibly pessimistic to an overly optimistic view, but a balanced, fair, realistic view will often make us feel a lot better. The next one, again, active behavior. And I use the word active a lot because I think, again, things we do almost knowingly have a greater impact on particularly our mood and our emotions than things we almost do without thinking. So you may well be doing quite a lot of things already that are helping you, but try and recognize those. And when you're doing them, do them with that awareness that you're doing them to help you, because it's almost a double win then. You're doing something positive for yourself and you get the benefit of whatever you are doing. So you're taking care of yourself in two ways. But they can be all sorts of things. And obviously, hopefully some of you have been to some of the earlier sessions we're offering, and there's another one next week as well. But there may be relaxation techniques. Mindfulness is obviously very popular at the moment. Exercise, Alyssa, one of my colleagues, did a webinar last week on that, and nutrition. And again, with nutrition, and very much this is what a Penny Brown nutritionist will say, is focus on what you can add to your diet. Don't beat yourself up, but if you can have generally a positive diet, and then when you fancy it, a treat, that's great. You don't have to be the perfect patient. And again, that can be another pressure, but think about things that you can do to help yourselves. The next one is both on one level blindingly obvious, but also I think really key. Sadly, one of the things I see a lot in my work as a counsellor is a lot of protection going on, both from people with cancer, but also their loved ones towards each other. So, how are you today? Oh, I'm fine. Perfect British response. But actually, often we're not fine. And I've certainly worked with people where it's a loving, close family, but they've all been protecting each other. So they all go off to their own rooms and have a bit of a cry or a wobble. And then when they're together, everybody's pretending that it's fine and putting on a brave face. And actually, by doing that, we're not helping either ourselves or our loved ones. If we don't show them when we're vulnerable or struggling, they won't show us when they are. Plus, also, we're denying ourselves the support and love of the people best able to give it to us. So I'd really encourage you, if you are maybe protecting your loved ones, first of all, unless you're really, really good actors, then almost certainly they will know have an idea of what's really going on. But actually opening up that conversation, it's okay to be upset together if necessary, but actually they can help support you and you can help support them. The next one, again, sounds maybe simplistic, or at times might sound almost impossible. But if at all possible, try to have some nice things to do now and to look forward to. If I was to have a look in a lot of your diaries, I would probably see hospital appointments, medical interventions, things like that dominating. And so if you look at your diary, there's maybe literally nothing to look forward to. So it doesn't have to be a huge thing. During COVID, actually, it was very difficult to socialize, but actually we could still make a special evening for ourselves. Actually, we're going to put a favorite film on, we're going to cook a nice meal or get a nice takeaway, spoil ourselves and make an event of it, and then write it in our diaries. So it's something to look forward to. Okay, I might have a scan on Tuesday and a blood test on Thursday, but actually on Saturday night, I'm going to have a lovely evening in. But also, as COVID now does hopefully become a little bit more in the background, there is the chance to socialize and maybe have, a day out or a weekend away. So, really try and get those things in, because the fun things in life are the things that often get squeezed really quickly when we're under stress. But actually, we need those to balance all the nasty stuff. We need them in normal day-to-day life. Normal day-to-day life without cancer is quite tough and hard at times with work and other commitments. So the fun things are there to balance. They're a necessity. But actually, when you're then going through a really challenging time, they become even more important. But as I said, ironically, of course, they're the first thing to go. sometimes people really worry about letting other people down. Oh, I don't want to say I'm going to meet up with somebody because I might not feel well enough on the day. But if that's a good friend, they'll understand and explain to me in advance, maybe, look, let's have this date, but you need to understand that I might need to cancel at the last moment. And I will pretty much guarantee that your good friends will go, yeah, that's fine. If I can see, that's lovely, but not the end of the world if you don't. So don't again feel guilty about potentially letting others down. And also, things at Pennybourne UK itself that we might be able to support you. One of the things, I suppose, one of the few benefits that's come out of COVID for us as an organisation is we've massively improved our online resources. So there's lots of support services and groups online. There's both live groups which you can join, but there's also lots of videos and information. So there's all sorts of things there that you might be able to look at. And there's probably far too much for you to try and do everything. So with all of these things, both today, things I'm talking about, but also with the other sessions, it's choosing what is right for you. You are the experts on you. So one thing might think, yeah, that's going to really work. The next thing might be, no, that is not for me. That's fine. Work out what you need and try and find those things. And one of the things we do offer at Pennybourne is one-to-one counselling. And there is a waiting list. Please be aware of that. So, but yes, for some people that can be really helpful if there's particular issues or problems they're really stuck with, as a way of trying to help them move forward. The next thing I want to talk about is anxiety. Before I almost go into the strategies, I want to talk a little bit almost about anxiety. I think the first thing to recognise is anxiety is normal. Anxiety and feeling anxious is part of what makes us as humans. When we were cave people wandering around going on a hunt and some nasty animal jumped out in front of us, actually what we got was an incredibly anxious response, and that pumped us full of adrenaline. And then we would either fight or run away. I think I'm pretty sure I know what I'd do, but actually either way, that burst of adrenaline is really helpful. But I almost think of adrenaline a bit like caffeine. So I need a cup of coffee or two to get me going in the day. That's helpful. However, if I was to drink coffee all day, I'd be really jittery on edge. And it's a bit similar with anxiety. Now, there's times when anxiety can be helpful, it can clarify the mind, but actually if we're really stuck, then it can dominate and be really, really unhelpful. And often we can feel just a general sense of anxiety. I'm just feeling really anxious and on edge the whole time. So what can be helpful here in the first bullet point is to try and work out what's really going on in that general feeling of anxiety. So something I sometimes suggest is to maybe get a sheet of paper and close your eyes if you want to, but then almost to imagine white clouds going across a blue sky. And those clouds are your various thoughts. So just try and observe those clouds, observe those thoughts. Don't judge them, don't think about them, but just write down any thoughts that go across your head for maybe 5 minutes or so. And there'll be everything from the really significant to the really banal. So actually some of the anxiety may well be about diagnosis, prognosis, but there also may be a bit of anxiety around, oh, what am I going to have for tea tonight? And actually by separating out those things, you then can focus on them individually much more easily. So those things, the examples there, diagnosis and prognosis, work and finances, things like that, particularly those are really helpful maybe to try and tackle with more information. So think about where you might be able to get the information that can help you. So I've put some suggestions there. GPs, oncologists, cancer nurse specialists can be really great if you have one. Let's be honest, consultants are very good at treating disease, but they're not always the best at communicating. Whereas cancer nurse specialists tend to be able to speak English and be really clear. So if you've had a meeting with an oncologist or a surgeon and you've come out of it more confused than when you went in, talk to the cancer nurse specialist, talk to somebody else, try and find out what's going on. There's no need for you to be confused or unclear. The Macmillan website is a fantastic resource. They have information booklets to download on pretty much anything and everything linked to cancer, both physical side, emotional side, financial, all those areas. Pennybron, we have lots of information you can look at, and there will be specialist charities like the one we're working with here today, and that can really help with some of the uncertainty and fear of the unknown. Anxiety is primarily around either replaying or worrying about past events or worrying about future events, and uncertainty is a huge part of that. And for many of you, your cancer diagnosis and prognosis will have a huge amount of uncertainty with it. So anything you can clarify and get some more information on will take away some of that uncertainty, and then will hopefully help you manage that anxiety. I think important to recognize that what we're talking about here is managing anxiety. It's not about getting rid of it. It's probably unreasonable to expect any of you to not feel some anxiety at least some of the time, or maybe all of the time, about your situation. But if you can manage it so it is having less of an impact on your life, then hopefully that will be something that will really help you. Distractions are a different way of approaching anxiety, and are particularly helpful if there's something either suddenly in your mind which you can't get out of it, or actually maybe you're waiting for an appointment in a hospital. And it's something, so for me, a distraction is something that really, really makes you focus. Now, mindfulness is something that a lot of you will have heard about, and is very much a thing that's in vogue at the moment. It's something we do a lot of at Pennybron. And that is generally a sort of a meditation or a talked exercise or visualization. And the idea is it brings you right into that moment. So while you're focusing on that, you're not worrying about something that's happened in the past or worrying about something that might happen in the future. However, there's other ways you can do things mindfully. Now, I'm a counsellor at Pennybron, but I have to admit, I'm not very good at meditations or mindfulness. I know it's probably a sackable offence, but I'm not. However, I can do things mindfully. So if I put on a favourite piece of music really loud and jump around the room to it, for those 5 minutes, I am not thinking about the day I've just had or what's happening tomorrow. Reading for some people is a complete distraction. Jigsaw, Sudoku. Sometimes people talk about bouncing a ball on the ground. There's counting backwards. I think one of the ones I've heard is counting backwards from 100 in threes or sevens or something like that. It doesn't really matter what it is. The idea is it's something you're entirely focused on, and that can help break that cycle, that loop of anxious thinking. And then after that, you can think, okay, what can I do now to move forward? I've broken that loop. Now I've got control back. However, sometimes things are worrying you the whole time. You just cannot get them out of your head. And it's like they're there the whole time during your day, and it's almost like a shadow over you. So this technique, the third one there, worry time, it sounds a bit crazy, but actually a lot of people find it quite helpful. So the idea is, during the day, whenever that particular thought or worry comes to you, you say to yourself, no, not now. I'm going to save some time at the end of the day to think about this. So say at 7:30, it doesn't have to be 7:30, but sometime in the evening, you dedicate half an hour to be your worry time. And so during the day, you go, no, I'm not going to think about this now. I'll think about it at 7:30. And then maybe at 7:30, you could use either some information, trying to narrow it down to what's going on, and then thinking about, can I get some information on this, or do I need to distract myself? But even though it sounds like it shouldn't work, I think it does, because in a way what we're doing is we're acknowledging that worry. So we're not dismissing it. We're not saying don't think about it, but we're taking control of it. No, I will take this seriously, but when I choose to. And it can help people then feel less anxious or worrisome all through that day. The final one, and people have lots of different feelings about this, and there's no right or wrong, but medication for anxiety, low mood, or even problems with sleep is a possibility and can be really helpful at times. Now, then I'm sure there's some of you out there who would say, no, this is definitely not for me. And that's fine. That's absolutely, it's your personal choice. But actually, you are possibly going through a particularly difficult situation at the time, and you will probably be taking lots of other medication and medicines to deal with the physical side of things. And it might be that some medication to help with the mental health and emotional health side of things is part of that package, in effect. So it's not a sign of weakness. It can be, actually, this is part of what's going to help me get through this time. So, if you are having you can recognize these things having a real impact on you, consider talking to your GP, just having that discussion. Again, the choice will always be yours, but it can be part of an overall package that might support you. Now, this, for me, is really important. Above all else, be kind to yourselves. Don't dismiss bad feelings, but respond positively to them. What would you say or suggest to a best friend who's going through what you're going through, and then you try to do that for yourselves? And the reason I put that up there is we all have a sort of an inner voice, an inner narrative, and that tends to be often quite critical. So if we're having a bad day, it can often be the case that I'm having a bad day and I'm going to beat myself up for having a bad day, because actually I shouldn't be feeling bad. I'm having all this support and I've got all these people around me and I've got no right to feel like this. Pull my socks up. Now, we wouldn't dream of saying that to a best friend, because actually it wouldn't help them. It would just make them feel even worse. And that's exactly what it does for ourselves. So actually, but saying to somebody, be kind to yourself, actually, a lot of people are like, what on earth does that look like? So it can be really difficult for people to imagine that for themselves. But I think you can all imagine what you would say to someone else who was going through the same situation as you. And it would be kind and supportive words. And just before I finish the talking part, and then you go on to the much more interesting bit, which is responding to your questions, there's 4 A's that I like to refer to. And I think these are really key to looking after ourselves emotionally and mentally during this challenging time. Now, they're a bit wordy, so I'll say what they are and then I'll explain what I mean by them. So the 4 A's are acceptance, authenticity, autonomy, and adequacy. And what I mean by those is acceptance. Acceptance for me is, again, a very active thing. Acceptance isn't a passive shrugging the shoulders and saying this is okay, because dealing with cancer is not okay. But if we can accept that this is our situation, then it's a relatively short step for me to then, okay, if this is my situation, how can I live as well as possibly with it? Authenticity is honesty. So being honest with ourselves about how we are, but also honest with others. Autonomy is things we can control. So there's lots of things we can control. If we've got a question, we can either think, oh no, I can't get in touch with anybody, or I can't, I've already spoken to my cancer nurse specialist this week, I can't call her again. Actually, you can. And then you take control of that situation. And adequacy, the idea of being good enough. So you will be good enough patients. I see again at Penny-Brown, sometimes some people trying to be the perfect patient, and that just adds another stress to what you're doing. So focus on all the positive things you're doing. Even coming along to these webinars is doing more than just accepting the medicine. You're trying to do other things to take care of yourselves. So the more you can do is great. Focus on what you're doing rather than maybe what you're not doing. So thinking again, maybe about the diet, if you're eating healthily most of the time, great. And then if you want to treat, that's good as well. That feeds a different part of the soul, but that's definitely good enough. So I think that's probably as much as I want to say at the moment. I think in a moment, David's going to launch a second poll for the end of the session. So I'll let David do that, and then I'll look forward to having some questions fired at me and hopefully responding to them. So thank you for listening, and I'll let you do the poll now.
Thanks very much, Alan, for that. We've launched the poll, so we'll leave it open again for about 1 minute, and then we will share the results with you, and then we can open up for questions. Thanks.
Great.
I'm gonna keep it open for about 10 more seconds, and then we will. Great, thanks everyone, and I'm closing the poll now. So Alan, hopefully you can see that. So I've actually got both of the polls beside me. So I think it's really great to see in the first question how we're able to attendees feel to now support their emotional well-being. We've seen a big sort of decrease in 1 and 2. No one at 1, and unfortunately one person still at 2. So sorry about that, but hopefully in some of the Q&A we can find out how maybe we can boost that up for whoever answered number 2. Number 3 was dropped by about half, so it went from about 33% to about 17%. 4 increased from about 1 and 3 to about half, just over half of attendees. We also saw an increase in 5 by about 20%, so that's great.
Right.
And the second question, do you feel you now have and actually intend to use some new tools or techniques to help manage any anxiety you might feel? We've seen an increase in those who previously had done so in the last week, increasing from about 45% up to almost 3 in 4 of you answering yes to that. And for those who are not sure, the 15% or so, hopefully also, maybe we can, answer any of your uncertainties as well in the next half hour we've got for Q&A. And then finally, in the next week, will you try to do something to support yourself emotionally? Really great to see most people answering yes, about 90% of you answering yes. And again, those who are sort of not sure, or the one person who answered no, let's see if we can change your mind and convince you of that in the next half hour. So thank you very much, everyone, for responding to that. And what I'll do now is I'm going to open up to questions. So if you have a question for Allon, if you can please type it in the Q&A section, and then I'll read them out to him.
Lovely, thank you.
So just waiting for the first question to come in.
Yeah.
But whilst we're waiting for that to come in, I just wanted, some really interesting points from your presentation. Obviously, I thought the worry time, something that actually I'm going to take away from this and use. I think that it sounds like a great idea to, schedule in a time to worry about things, and then tell myself I don't have to worry about them at other times because I've got a set time to do that. So I think that's
I think it works because it's exactly that. It's not dismissing those worries, but it's actually I'm going to choose when I look at them, rather than them just sort of shadowing me all through the day. Absolutely. And I think a lot of these things, for me, there's a big difference between the active and the passive. So actually, as I said, but all of you, by being here, are doing something more than just accepting the NHS medicine approach. You're doing other things, you're interested in other things that might help support you. And all those things can really, yeah, make you feel in control. And there's a lot that you can do to help yourselves both physically, emotionally, mentally, which will help you on every level manage and hopefully have a better chance of a better outcome from the cancer.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Let me ask then, whilst we're still waiting for some questions. Oh, okay, here's some questions that are coming in.
Okay.
But I was actually, I'll ask this anyway. Perhaps, and you can choose to ask a question anonymously. So I don't want to single you out, but anyone who answered either no or not sure to maybe the last question, will they try to do something to support yourself emotionally? If you fancy sharing some thoughts on that in the Q&A section. Again, you can ask that anonymously, so you don't need to worry about us knowing who you are. But maybe we can try and assuage some of those concerns and change your mind on that. But perhaps whilst you're doing that, I'll answer some of the questions that's just come in.
Sure.
So we've got from Martin. We're left to make our own treatment decisions, leading to worry of correct choices.
Yep. So one thing I always say to people is, when we make any choice in life, but I think it's particularly relevant when it was around treatment, as it is here, we make those decisions at the time with all the information we have to hand. And therefore, we make that right decision for us at the time. And so, as far as I'm concerned, it remains the right decision. Hindsight can be a really unhelpful thing. Often I've worked with people where they look back and say, oh, I shouldn't have had that treatment, or I should have done that. Of course, we didn't know that at the time. So whatever, and also you don't know what the outcome would be if you'd chosen the other thing. It doesn't necessarily mean it would have had a better outcome. So I think almost trusting yourself that you will, with all the information you have to hand, make the decision that is right for you at that time. And therefore, almost trying to then be at peace with that, because that's all you can do. That's all any of us can do. Does that make sense?
That was hopefully it does. I thought that made sense. But if you'd like to follow up, Martin, to answer your question, please, you can type in a response and I'll ask that. We have a question from Paul. So this last week, I've had an urge to just give up and end this pain for my family with suicidal thoughts. Really sorry to hear that, Paul. He asks, how can I manage these thoughts?
I think the first thing, in a way, it's really positive that you've been able to put that in, as a question today. And in a way, you started that process, which is talking to somebody about it. So I'd encourage you to either a family member or a friend as a starting point to talk to that about, but also ideally with your GP and possibly somebody in your oncology team. It's not unusual for people to feel so overwhelmed by the situation that they feel they don't want to go on. That's quite a normal feeling. It's not nice, but it's quite normal. However, when things start to become a plan or a timescale, then it's really time to try and seek support. So you're doing that by reaching out and asking that question. So as I said, if you can talk to family or friends, that's great. But otherwise, I'd really encourage you to talk to your GP. Obviously, if you're feeling really desperate, then you can call the Samaritans. But I guess there's part of it maybe as well, and it's not 100% clear from the question, but I think it's often a bit of both, is maybe often people feel they can't carry on with what's happening and feeling overwhelmed, but also they don't want their family to go through what's going on. But actually, I'd focus on you rather than other people. Other people almost certainly wouldn't want you to take your life, to save them from any pain. That would probably almost certainly cause them more pain. So think about actually how you are and what you need, and try and find some support from that. And certainly, I think this is something perhaps, we can follow up with you, perhaps David, you might have some contact details, and whether there's something we can offer at Penny-Brown or somewhere else. But yeah, you've started the process, you've reached out, and that's the most important thing. And hopefully from that, you can get the support you need. I can't pretend it's going to be easy, what you're going through or what you will be going through, but there is support out there for you.
Thank you for that, Allon. And Paul, if you're happy with us connecting you, please, if you could just let me know in the Q&A section, and then I'll go ahead and connect you directly with the team at Penny-Brown. Thank you for that question, and thank you for the answer, Allon. A question from Jacqueline. She prefaces it with, it's not really a question, but I think there's something definitely for you to answer here. I do think additional anxiety is caused by not being clear about how the outcome affects your future. I feel like my husband and I have spent 7 years worrying about his mortality and perhaps wasted that time.
Yeah. I want to say yes, not in relation to the waste of that time, but actually I think the uncertainty of a cancer diagnosis is one of the biggest challenges of, our tagline at Penny-Brown is living well with cancer, and living well with prostate cancer. It's one of the biggest challenges. There's no easy solution I can offer you on that. One of the things an image I use a lot, and it sounds absolutely crazy, but is a fried egg. So the idea is that the yolk is whatever's having a really big impact on you. So the yolk here is the cancer. Now, when you first crack an egg into the frying pan, all you see is the yolk. The white's translucent at that stage. Over time, the white grows around the yolk. And so the idea is to try and grow as much life around the reality of the cancer as possible. Actually, it's not trying to dismiss that cancer or those worries, those concerns, because it's normal, reasonable to have those. But the more white, the more life you have around that, then proportionally it's less dominating. So actually trying to move forward with this reality rather than being stuck with what might happen. So, and also, again, the idea of we do the best we can in the situation. So I would encourage you to try not to think about the last 7 years as wasted, because actually they've not been, because you've been together. And moving forward, if you can try and focus on the things you can do and the things that are in your control, rather than what may happen in relation to the cancer, which will remain uncertain, then that may help you a little.
Thank you for that, Allon. Thank you. We have another question come in, but just to address my open question to the person who had answered no. Thank you very much for your response. The response was, well, I currently have a very positive approach to my results and ongoing actions. It's working for me, so I don't feel that I need to do anything differently at this time. So
absolutely, and
fantastic.
I think I would absolutely agree with that. You are the expert on you, whoever you are, and I think it's all very well having people come in and sort of suggest and talk about things, but actually you individually will all know what you need. And so actually at the moment you don't need any things. That's great. Hopefully you won't need them, but if you do in the future, hopefully now you have some resources and some ideas. But absolutely, if you're good at the moment and feeling positive and fine, great, go with that.
We have another question that's come in, and I think there's possibly, I guess both for you and also I think there's a little bit that I can answer here as well, is I think that being able to make an informed decision will dramatically cut down the volume of anxiety. However, this is not always possible, as the available information is almost always general and may not necessarily apply to individual cases. How far are you from being able to find answers specific to the person searching for it? So I think for my part, sort of answering that, I think that's a really good question. I think one of the things we as an organization, PCR, are working on is building sort of second phase of a platform we launched earlier this year, the info pool, and we hope by the end of the year to have a bit more information about when that will be. Just sort of putting in place some of the sort of processes and plans for that. But the idea with that is that will hopefully help you make more informed and empowered decisions when it comes to treatment choices, and learning from a much larger group of individuals who've been through those experiences, and sort of having that balance between clinically moderated but patient-led data to help you make more informed decisions. So, I appreciate that. It's not yet available here, but I hope that sometime next year that we'll be looking to launch that platform, and that's something I definitely keep you updated on as that progresses.
Yeah, and I suppose from my point of view, I would, encourage you to ask as many questions as you want or need to, both of your actual oncology team, but also experts like prostate cancer research. For people who are interested in working with Penny Bron, we are able to offer, again, there's a bit of a waiting list, but one-to-ones with our doctors. Now, our doctors are GPs, but with a specialism in cancer. And I think that can be really helpful, because sometimes, with the best will in the world, some consultants, I think, are in danger of seeing a cancer rather than a person with cancer. And because our doctors come from a GP background, they very much see the whole person, and therefore are maybe more open to, trying to work out what is best for that individual. And that will vary from person to person. So an oncologist will probably be very much focused on getting rid of the cancer, or trying to limit the cancer, or trying to slow it down. And sometimes maybe won't always take into account the impact of that treatment on the person. And they maybe say that maybe that's something that can be helpful with, a Penny Bron doctor, is that they will look at you as an individual and try and work with you to help you find the right decision for you.
Thank you for that. And just got an answer from Richard as well. I think was also related to the question I put out there. Was as the one who said they won't be doing anything extra next week, I don't actually feel the need. Having an academic background, I feel able to keep control of treatment and argue my case. I'm physically able to do almost anything normal for someone 10 years younger, so happy to carry on as usual.
Great. Yeah, and long may that continue.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think that speaks to your point as well. Each one of you are individuals, and you know your case best, and where some of Allon's tips and techniques can help you, and you feel could make your life better. Fantastic, and that applies to all of the things that we'll be touching on in this webinar series, where there are things that will help you live better and live well with prostate cancer. By all means, please do try take them up, but where they're not relevant to you, you can maybe pass those tips on to someone else who you might think might benefit from them, but otherwise keep on doing what works for you.
Yeah, and I think it's really important to recognize that you are probably going to be dealing with lots of experts, lots of experts in cancer and its treatment, but there's only one expert on you, and that is of course yourselves. So really being in touch with almost our gut instinct, I think, is really important. Now, it's not always right, but it's telling us something really powerful. And I think from education onwards, we're taught very much to focus on thinking and analysing, and almost to not listen to that animal, that gut instinct. So I would always encourage you to at least listen to it. As I said, it's not always right, because it's as simple as that. You go to a roulette table and it was going to be red because that's what your body told you. Of course, it's not like that. But in relation to big things, like cancer treatment or big things in life, that gut instinct, that immediate response will be telling you something really powerful. So it's always worth trying to listen to and observe that, and then take that into account as much as the thinking side of things.
We've got just, I thought I'd pass on these. We have some comments coming in, thanking you for the presentation of another informative and useful webinar and an excellent presentation. So we wanted to pass those on.
Lovely, thank you.
And sort of a point from Ken, I think reaffirming what you were saying is, treat the patient, not the disease.
Yeah, you are all individual, and as part of that as well, all of your life experiences up to, and including, the prognosis and diagnosis, will impact on how you manage both physically, emotionally, mentally, the cancer you have. So you could have two people with an identical cancer, identical ages, and they have completely different responses, both physically and emotionally and mentally. So absolutely, sort of looking at that individual rather than, the disease.
And thank you everyone who have asked questions. We don't have any more questions coming at the moment, so
Okay.
I maybe give you another minute to if anyone wants to ask that, any final questions. But if we have no other questions, then we will we'll wrap today's session up a little bit early.
Fair enough. Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that really struck me, and it was lovely to see a positive increase in the second poll to the first poll, but actually was how many people were already doing a lot of positive things to help themselves. And now again, I think that's probably because you're the type of people who are coming to these webinars. You're interested in doing more, and so there's a really strong starting point for a lot of you there. And I think taking these things seriously, looking at all these other things other than just the physical and disease side of things, is going to stand you in good stead for living as well as you can with whatever your situation is. And I think that idea of living well is as relevant to somebody with the best prognosis and somebody with a very bad prognosis. Actually, how does that person live as well as they can with their own situation?
Brilliant. Well, thank you for that. Then, oh, sorry, I do see one person who's got raised their hand, so I'm just going to find that. Okay, I think that was to Lawrence's point, and I've just replied to him directly there. So then, if no other questions coming in, I'd just like to say a big thank you to Allon for today's presentation. I think there are some really useful points, and a nice thing that we learned from Alyssa last week. She sort of included in her presentation was, if you've got a moment, and you were one of the people who sort of said there was now something you plan to do to sort of change change your behavior. One of the helpful things sometimes is just maybe write that down. Maybe take a moment, after getting off this presentation, write that down on a piece of paper somewhere, stick it on your fridge, type it in your notes on your phone, wherever you kind of remember things or find things, and just try to sort of make that conscious effort and to make that change and make it that kind of habit to help you sort of remember to do that. And if it doesn't take too long to build a habit, once you're in the pattern of doing things, it obviously gets a lot easier.
Absolutely. And I think for me, if there's one thing I'd say, if you just took one thing from today's session, it would be that be kind to yourselves. Very often, people I work with, unfortunately, they give themselves a really hard time and they don't talk to themselves as they would talk to a best friend. So, if the starting point is, I'll be kind to myself, I'll listen to what my needs are, and I will try my best to get those met. That will be, the biggest thing that's going to help you emotionally and mentally.
I think there's, sorry, just as I was about to wrap up, one question came in, so I'm going to put it here. From David's saying, I'm trying to understand why it is that friends, when finding out about my husband's cancer, always seem to respond by referring to a family member or friend who has someone who they know who's absolutely fine now or much worse.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, a cancer diagnosis, a lot of people are incredibly uncomfortable with ill health and cancer. And people, you get everything from people saying really unhelpful things like that. So yeah, if someone's got a really bad prognosis, actually hearing somebody who's much better now, that's not really very helpful. Equally, somebody who, says, oh yeah, I know somebody who died of that or was really ill with that, that's not going to be helpful. It's unfortunately, it's their awkwardness. It doesn't help you, but I think it's just recognizing that a lot of people just, for whatever reason, just feel really difficult and struggle and are awkward with disease and ill health, and they will say things that are really unhelpful and inappropriate. And it's, as much as possible, try not to let that have too much of an impact on you. It's easy to say, I appreciate, but actually, whether their friend has got a better or worse case of cancer is irrelevant. Your situation is your situation. And actually, there's something there I think quite important about comparisons, and this is something I often talk about in my work. often we make comparisons to others, or as that person's friend was saying, almost comparing their husband's situation to other people's. And in my experience, comparisons are very, very rarely helpful. Either we are comparing ourselves to people who we think are better off, in which case we might feel bad or possibly resentful or envious. But more importantly, often is comparing ourselves to people we think are worse off. And that's often a way of almost negating our own experience. Oh, I can't feel bad about my situation because I was in hospital and there was somebody next to me who was much worse off. Actually, that doesn't change your situation. So the things we have to deal with are relevant only to ourselves. So, when people either offer comparisons, or actually if you find yourself doing that, oh, I've got so much to be grateful for, I shouldn't feel sad. Other people are in a much worse situation than me. That doesn't change your situation. So I think really just focus on you and your situation, and whatever you are having to deal with is relevant only to yourself.
That seems to have really sparked a couple of comments from people who definitely, had similar situations.
Yeah.
Selwyn is saying, I try to remain detached from others' comments about cancer, recognizing they often find it difficult. But John, who was in a very shocking situation, from example from his consultant, who told me to look at those with no legs.
Yes. I think you did very well, John. I'm assuming you didn't thump the consultant in the face, but assuming you didn't, then I think you showed a remarkable resilience and patience there. I mean, that's just unbelievably unhelpful and fatuous comment, to be honest. I mean, and possibly a person with no legs might think they're actually much better off than somebody who's got cancer. Actually, it's just unhelpful. It's irrelevant. It doesn't change your situation.
Fortunately, John did not thump his consultant and laughed at how ridiculous the comment was. So
yeah, and I'm pleased. I'm not suggesting you go and do it. I don't want to be an accessory to a crime.
We have one final question coming from Richard, asking your comments on those who say anger is often seen as destructive. Yeah,
and I think if we're angry all the time, absolutely, it's destructive and unhelpful. But I think it's okay and sometimes important to allow ourselves to be angry on occasion. So there's a phrase I've heard recently, the tyranny of positivity. So this idea that we've got to be positive the whole time. And actually that can be really draining and is just another pressure. So those times when we are feeling angry, it's okay, as far as I'm concerned, to acknowledge that, to express that. If you get really stuck in that over a long period of time, that's maybe when you might want some support, maybe some counselling or something like that. But to acknowledge that anger and to express it, absolutely, I think that's okay. And it's, for me, I think it's certainly healthier to acknowledge and express it than it is to try and suppress it and pretend it's not there.
So would you say, is realism better than positivity?
I personally would say so. Again, it's up to the individuals, but some people want to take an entirely positive approach, and that's fine for them. But I think generally for me, I think having a realistic view of things, a balanced view, is the most helpful. But again, as I said, I've said all the way through this, it's what works for you individually, not what I say. So actually, if you want to take a really positive view of things, great, that's what you want to do, that's what you need. Somebody else might want to shift to going from a more balanced view, but it's really what works for you as individuals. You are the experts on you.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a lovely time to wrap up with that sort of reminder that you guys are all the experts on yourselves. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and another big thank you to Allon for a really interesting and informative presentation.